Why didn't I hear the shiksa go on? One more time. Maybe she was off for the weekend. I don't know.
Maybe she's still Shabbos stick. That's why.
That could be. Okay. Anyway, let's just chazer iba what we did on Friday. Okay, just halt cup because you can't learn the next piece of Gemara without it. We saw a machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir whether an animal could be used to be machshir a sukkah, the doifin of a sukkah. Rabbi Meir said no, and the Chachamim said yes. Rabbi Meir said no, the Chachamim said yes. The Gemara asked, what's the reason for Rabbi Meir's no? We had a machlokas amaroyim between Abaye and Rabbi Zera as to why not. Rabbi Zera said maybe it's going to run away. Abaye said maybe it's going to die. So we saw that the Loid Abaye, Rabbi Meir is chayish lemisa. We asked from a case. We asked from a case of a Kohen going overseas, leaving his wife as a Bas Yisrael, and then we saw a case of Gittin where we said that she could eat truma, so we see that we consider him alive. Conversely, if you give a get an hour before you die, she can't eat right away. We answered up. The one that speaks about taking a trip is Reb Meir. He's not chayish lemisa, and Rabbi Yehuda is chayish lemisa, and therefore what? Therefore you're chayish for a get. We asked l'chayre is now a kash on Reb Meir, so we said switch it around. But now, how do we know that Rabbi Yehuda is chayish lemisa? Because by the case of breira, the case of a barrel of wine that was separated, he says shemi yibak anod, and just like he was worried that shemi yibak anod, maybe the barrel will go ahead and break, so too he's worried that maybe what the person denied. We ended up basically that there's in that Reb Meir it switched around. He's chayish lemisa. Rabbi Yehuda is not chayish lemisa, and the din by the wine was a breira dikadin and not shemi yibak anod. We said, how does Rabbi Yehuda not chayish lemisa? We see by the first Mishnah in Yuma he is chayish lemisa. He said you have to separate a second wife. And we said that's a special mile we made for Yom Kippur. Like there's a special mile by Paraduma, there's a special mile Yom Kippur. So now we're going to slug up the reasons of Abaye and Rabbi Zera. Because according to Rabbi and Rabbi Zera, fellas, it's a good mechitza. The MS, the animal is a good mechitza. The Rabbanan, I'm worried maybe it'll run away. The Rabbanan, I'm worried maybe it will die. But the etzem mitzias of the material is a good mechitza. So if that's the case, we have a Mishnah that says that an animal, Rabbi Meir says that an animal is in fact, why can't a goylel is a l'chayra, can you use an animal as a goylik to go ahead and be on top of the keva? So we pick it up over there, 12 lines in the bottom, Fred the Gemara, 12 lines to the bottom. Bein leman da'amar shemet Thomas, whether it's Abaye in Reb Meir. Bein leman da'amar shemet Tivrach, whether it's Reb Zera in Reb Meir. Midaraisa mechitza ma'al yasehi. Midaraisa, it's a good mechitza. For Rabbanan who the gozer bein, it's the Rabbanan who's gozer. Elameyata l'Reb Meir titama mishum goylel. If it's a good mechitza, then it should receive tumas goylel. It should receive tumas goylel. Alama Tanan, on this we learn, Rabbi Yehuda mitama mishum goylel. Rabbi Yehuda says the animal is tamei. For Rabbi Meir mitar, and Rabbi Meir says it's tar. But if it's a valid mechitza, according to you Abaye, according to you Rabbi Zera, it's a valid mechitza, then it should be makabel tuma from the mace, right? And Rabbi Meir says it doesn't. So obviously you must hold it's not a valid mechitza. So that does away with your pshat. You wanted to say by the sukkah. The reason why it really is a good mechitza, and it's a gezerah derabanan, maybe it'll run away, maybe it'll die, it must be that it's not a good mechitza. Midaraisa, it's not a good mechitza. Because if it was a good mechitza, how could it be tahar? So therefore, we need a new pshat in Reb Meir. Why in the world you can't use an animal as a doifin for a sukkah? And obviously, it must be that it's not good at all, not a gezerah derabanan. And that's what the Gemara is going to say right now. Ella, dead end. Zeir is out, Abaye is out, no gezerah shemet tivrach, no gezerah shemet tamus. So Amrav Achav Yaakov Kesav Reb Meir kol mechitza she'imedes beruach eina mechitza. Any mechitza that stands by wind it needs wind to go ahead and keep it alive, to keep it there. A wind to keep it there is not a mechitza. It doesn't mean wind over here does not mean a wind blowing. It means an animal's neshama. So in other words, anything that needs wind to keep it up is not a good mechitza. And that's why it's no good. Ikedi Amri, another shot in Amra Vacha Bayakov. Ksafra Meya, Kol Mechitza Sheina Suya Bidei Adam, any mechitza that's not made by man, ain't a mechitza. It's not any mechitza that's not made by man is not a mechitza. Says Rashi. Ruach Chaim, lav bidei adam hu. Ruach Chaim is not by man. Shari ein ruach biyadar l'nafchai. You can't go ahead and blow wind into an animal. Haimedus beruach al yedei ruach. So anything that stands al yedei ruach. Lav mechitza he deikar midasa davar shem b'mamishu. Meaning, guys, a mechitza has to have pashtus, has to have material towards it. Good, we have a din of a lavud, we have a din of good asik, but they do begin with the material. Masha'en came an animal that is being held up by a ruach, Mike, by a ruach in it. That ruach has no mamashas to it, and therefore it can't be what a good mechitza. It can't be a good mechitza. Conversely, anything that's not mi b'dei adam, an animal is not made b'dei adam, is what a ruach chaim is not b'dei adam who, and therefore it's not a good mechitza. My binayu, what's the nafkamina between two pshatim in Rav Acha bar Yaakov? Whether it's a din in ruach or it's a din rad in b'dei adam, you have a mechitza that's being held by, you blew up like a big balloon, and the balloon is holding it up. The Mandiam says a mechitza that is a medis is not a mechitza, so this is being held up by a ruach, and therefore it's not a good mechitza. The Mandiam eina asuya b'dei adam. Over here, because the person blew into it. In other words, the wind of an animal is not person's wind. The wind of the balloon that he blew up is the person's wind. So if you have a mechitza and it's being held up by wind, it's being held up by what? By a bag with wind. Like the Mandiyama that says that like the Mandiyama says that anything that has a wind in it, that's held up by wind, it's not a good mechitza. So in this case, not a good mechitza, because it's being held up by wind. Any wind wouldn't be good. Like the mandiyama has to be bidei adam, it's considered bidei adam because the wind is bidei adam. Going back over the Bryce, that's the end result. So we have machloikis in the end between Rabbi Huda and Rabbi Meya, whether you can use an animal. The halacha is, guys, if the animal's tied up, you could use it. The halacha is, if the animal's tied up, you could use it, and if the animal will die and it will stay above the 10 tfachim mark, it's good. If you're worried it's going to go down, then it's not good. That teretz that we gave, that it's tied up and it's large enough that if it dies, like it won't fall down, that's the halacha. Now, no one is using this la halacha, but that's the bottom line. Now, in the discussion we had earlier, we said not only can an animal not be used as a mechitza, that you can't write a get on an animal. Rabbi said you can't write a get on the animal. So now we're leaving Masech the Sukkah and we're going to Masech the Gittin. So Masech the Gittin, it says a person has a wife and it does not happen. Kimatza be'er v'astava, the chasala sefer krisus. He writes to her a book of krisus, the shulchmi base, and he sends her out. So this the chasala sefer krisus is a pasuk that has mountains of halacha. Mamish the whole Masech the Gittin baitan. And here is a component of those words. The chasala sefer krisus v'nasan biyada. Amamar, going back over the Brisa. Mishon Rabbi Yossi Gluli Amru, in the name of Rabbi Yossi Gluli, they said, Af ein koisrin lov kitei nashim. You can't write a get on an animal and give it to your wife to divorce her. My time Rabbi Yossi Gluli that you cannot use an animal. The Tanya, Seifa. It says v'chasla sefer krisis, ainli ela seifa. When it says seifa, I would think it's only a cloth. I would think it's parchment. Right. Minay l'rabis kol davar. How do I know to include everything? Talmud Leimar, it says v'chasav la mikol makom. When it says v'chasav la mikol makom. So now, if that's the case, and came out Talmud Leimar sefer is mashma klaf. So it should just write v'chasav la get v'chasav la krisis. Why are you saying sefer? Sefer is mashma a gillion. It's mashma what parchment. Now you're telling me v'chasav la is anything. So why lashon of sefer? To go ahead and compare that v'chosav law, that anything to a sefer. My sefer davashem ruachayim, a sefer that has no life force to it. Ve'ena oichel, it doesn't eat. Af kol davashem ruachayim ve'ena oichel, it doesn't eat. So therefore, that's the reason Rabbi Yosef Glili. The reason I can't write a get on the reason I can't write a get on a animal is because the animal is not compared to a sefer. It has to be compared to a sefer. Anything else, basically, you could write a get on. You have a leaf, you could write it on, as long as the leaf is disattached, you can write it on a leaf. You can write it on a leaf, not a problem. For Rabbanon, now the Rabbanon who said you could write it on an animal, the Rabbanon who said you could write it on an animal, how do they deal with the limudim of Rabbi Yosef Glili? Ikosav basefer, if it would have said, guys, the chosav krisis basefer, the chosav law, listen to it, I'm going to say it. The chosav of krisis basefer, if you have to write a krisis in a sefer, kidda ka'amit, it would be correct as you say. It would be mashma only what? A klaf. Hashta d'chsiv sefer, now that it says sefer krisis, it doesn't mean only klaf. It means the sviras devorim ba'alma. It means that in the get, you have to go ahead and it has kind of like a narrative to it. So the chosav sefer krisis, he writes words that are what? A narrative that about the get, that he's divorcing her and so on and so forth. So the Devarim Alma Hu Da'asa, to go ahead to Devarim Alma. Now, so according to Rabbanon, you could write on anything. Now, if you could write on anything, then what do I do with the chosav? Let's go back to Rabbi Yosef Glili. Seif is mashma klaf. The chosav is mashma anything. The Chachamim said it's mashma anything even without the chosav, because they said it says the sefer means what? Any sefer means the words ba'alma. It doesn't mean anything about what you're writing on. So you can write even on an animal. So what do they do with the word v'chasav, which is mashma anything, but they know anything already? Says the Gemara of Rabbanon, nikasav b'sefer k'dekam would be okay. Hash the kasav. Rabbanon hav'chasav my darish bay. Why do they go ahead and darshan with it? Right? Let's see Rashi. Rashi explains as I just did. Rabbanon, keeping the sefer lav klafu. Once you tell me sefer is not klaf, you don't need it to include anything. The mehechatesa, where are you going to think and come to the conclusion that you need a special thing? The itzrich lashmina should call double kashalach. In other words, when do you tell me you need that v'chasa means anything? Is that when you have a limud that it's not everything? So watch. If I have the word sefer, I'm limited to a klaf. So I need v'chasa to tell me you're not limited to a klaf. But if sefer means sviras devarim ba'alma, it means anything. So you don't have anything telling you that you're limited. You know everything already. So what's the v'chasav teaching me? And for the Gemara, I'll tell you what it's teaching me. You might have the following havamina. Since we make a hekesh, going out, lahavaya, to her coming in, it says guys. This is probably the most famous hekesh in the Torah. Vayotza v'hoisa. Vayotza, she leaves one, v'hoisa, and she'll be to another. So we make a hekesh. Just like her havaya, she's nichnas what with kesef. I would think that she can get divorced with kesef. Very often divorces do depend on money. But I mean, we're speaking about the etzem spheres I get, right? So that we say what? No, that's v'chasa. That you need v'chasa. Mahavai b'kesef av yitzia b'kesef kamash malon kamash malon. Now, so very good. So he learns v'chasa for that. So the question is now, since Rabbi Yossi needs the v'chasa to tell me you can write the get on anything, where does he know you can't divorce your wife with kesef? He doesn't have the rabbanans. He doesn't have the rabbanans pasuk. He used it already for something else. Rabbi Yosef Glili, high svarim minale. Where does he know it from? Me sefer krisis nafkale. He learns it from the word sefer krisis. Sefer kursa, dafkar a sefer, a document divorces her. Ve'ein dava achal kursa, nothing else. So you don't need the hekesh. You don't have to tell me that you would have a havamina that she gets divorced with with kesef, because again we have a pasuk telling me not. It's not for chasav law. It's the word krisis. The idach and the chachamim, what do they do with it? Since they learn v'chasav to teach me she doesn't get divorced with kesef, why does he learn sefer? And he learns that from v'chasav. What does he do with the word sefer krisis? that the get has to be something that cuts completely. There's no attachment whatsoever. There's something called sheer beget, leaving over beget, meaning the get is given on a condition, and that condition binds her to him. That's not a krisis. Krisis means cut, complete, finish, cut off, finito. The Kiditanya, for example, in a brisa, this is your get on the condition that what? You don't drink wine. So she gets divorced, and guess what? For the rest of her life, she can't be wine. Why? Because of her first husband. That's not a get. This is your get lo'ilam, but she never go back to daddy. That's not a good get. Ain't that krisis. However, if there's a limitation to it, how is that krisis? Why? Because you're only bound for those 30 days. It's like any other Tanai. The idach, and where does Rabbi Yosef Lili know that since he used the sefer krisis to tell me that a sefer is kairos and not kesef? Where does he go ahead and know that there's no sheer beget? It says in the lashon of karas krisis. When it could have write karas and writes krisis, nafka. The idach and the chachamim karas krisis like darshi. So we again a din of what in a get din. Very nothing to do with whatsoever with sukkah. Just Gemara digressing. Okay, the next up. Here we have a get, right? Here we have a sukkah that's made between trees, meaning the trees are its walls. 1, 2, the trees are its walls, but be aware that the schach has to be on imudim. The schach cannot be on the tree. If the schach was be on the tree, it'll be mishamish be'ilan, and if you mishamish be'ilan, then what? Then it's then on yontif you won't be able to go in on yontif. So this is I'll make it a little larger. Okay, a little larger, you can see it now. I made it so large you can't see it. There it is, right? Here it is. You have things like this there, right?
So what's the issue there? What's the problem?
What? No, I'm just telling you, you could use the walls as trees. That you might think, guys, the trees. We're going to learn a sugya tonight that if a wind blows the trees, if the blows back and forth, it's not a good wall. The Gemara is going to ask, it's not a good wall. So the Gemara is going to say it's speaking about stout trees. You see, the Gemara is speaking about stout trees. So that's the chiddush.
Do we have that case earlier with
No,
Achas
the case we had-
Bilan?
No, the case we had earlier was you had walls, but the Ilanis weren't the walls. There was the man-made walls on the bottom. Over here, the Ilanis are the walls. Over there was again whether it was a tree house heshi, and whether it could stand by itself or not. Here, it's on the ground. That's the difference between that case and the previous case. Okay, that's the difference between that case and the previous case. So says the Gemara. Someone makes a sukkah between the trees. The ilan is the funnest law, and the funnest law, it's keshera, right? Now, again, the Rashi is bothered by Heshi's question. If you look at Rashi, Beini Lanois Ba'aretz. Rashi is telling you it's speaking not in a tree house, it's speaking on the ground. And you don't put schach on them. You don't put schach on them. They are what? They are. It's an interesting rush, guys. They used to put stuff on top of the schach. They would go ahead and use the schach like storage. They put stuff on top of the schach. So if the schach was directly on the tree, you would be mishamish be'ilan. You won't be able to do it on yontif. That's what the rush says. So therefore, they had to have those imudim that Rashi drove. That Rashi pointed out in what we're reading right now. You don't put schach on them. Amra v'acha bar Yaakov. Kol mechitza sheni yicholu lamoy beruach mitzuya. Any mechitza that can't stand beruach mitzuya ain't a mechitza. Okay. Now over here, it means that not knock it down. It means moving it, as we'll see. Tanan. Ha'isa sukasei ben ilanos. The ilanos the funnest law. That's our Mishnah. Kshera. Fred Gemara v'ka ozl v'asi. They go and swing back and forth. Until now, fellas, when we said that it couldn't stand beruach mitzuya, we were speaking about knocking down the sukkah, similar to the case of Rabbi Akiva on the boat, where the ruach came and totally uprooted it. We're not speaking about that. We're speaking about the wind coming and making it sway back and forth. That's what we're speaking about. The wind is going to move it back and forth. If the wind moves the walls back and forth, they're not good walls. That's what it means. So what is Hachamayaskin and Bekoshin? So therefore, that's why we're speaking over here. We're speaking over here where it's stout. You see, they're trees that are not going to move. Now, notice in the background over here that there's branches over here. The Gemara assumes that it's not possible to have a tree that the branches are not going to be used as part of the schach. So therefore, the Gemara is going to answer the following. The Gemara is going to speak about where you braided those trees. So you notice here and over here you have the branches. Notice the black going through here. You braided it. So by braiding it, you're tying it down so it won't move. By braiding it, you're tying it down that should move. I hate to,
I'm sorry. If the trunk's at 7 tvachim, then you don't care where the branches go.
huh?
If the trunks are 7 and a fraction tvachim or 10 tvachim.
Again, it's a place where you have to rely on. You're going to have to rely on that area. It's not going to do the job. In the
No, but you don't.
seven-
You have the trunks are solid, then it's good.
But let's say you have a big sukkah, Aryeh. Let's say you have a very big sukkah and you don't have 2 complete walls. It's not going to be good. 7 tefachim is the minimal sukkah. If you have a sukkah gedola, 7's not going to do the job. You only need 1 wall. A tefach is on 1 wall. The other 2 have to be kosher walls.
I'm talking about the height.
Height is 10. We're not worried about 10 tefachim is good.
Right,
Oh,
but it's
saying
the
Zion
trunk.
tefachim. Okay, we'll
trunk-
see. We'll see. The height we'll see in a second. So now, Hachamay Bekashin. They're stout. They're just stout things. They're the branches. And for the overlay b'chutzla v'dafna. You braided the branches. That was the pictures, right? You braided the branches. So what's the chiddush then, right? You got full-fledged walls. You tied them down. What's the chiddush? I might think that even though the schach is not on the elon, you may come to use the elon. Kimash malon, you're not worried. Now, we're going to get into a different sugya, but guys, in halacha, this plays a very, 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 very powerful halacha l'maisa. For many years, people were not yotze the mitzvah of sukkah. Why? The sukkahs that they had that billowed back and forth, you see from the Gemara that if it moves back and forth, it sways back and forth, it's not a good sukkah. It's not a good sukkah. I'll read you in Taf Reish Lamed. Taf Reish Lamed. Ha'as sukkasa ben ilonis the funnest im hoye chazakim oik shekosha isam v'chizik isam achleit hey ruach mitzuyim minidam isam tamid umile ben avarim the 7 of a kash kadesh like a tanid isam a ruach v'kosha isam is aksher. In other words, if it's strong and it's braided and everything is it's good. No, it's just like we just saw. This is mechaber. Taf Reish Lamed Yud. Al kain ein nachoin lasleis kol mechitzos miyariya shel pishtin. You should make all the curtains out of linen walls, beloy konim, without reeds. Afal pisha kesharim b'toy, even though they're tied down very well. Zimnin the menatek, they're going to get it untied. V'lava datoy, and you won't be thinking about it. And if you want to make with sadinim, if you want to use sheets, you should go ahead and be oirig in the mechitza konim a little less than 3. A little less than 3. So if you notice the new sukkahs, if you have a new sukkah, they put these strings less than 3 tefachim from the bottom around. And this is the reason. This is the source. This Gemara. That makes it like lovewood, and it makes that you're not worried, like Aryeh says, it's going to be risen above. So you always have your 10 tefachim, right? That's the point of these small ropes that they put. I inherited a sukkah. I used to use a fiberglass sukkah for many years, and when I moved, I gave it to my daughter, and I got one of these sukkahs, and I noticed I never knew this halacha until it's retroactively this black band that you have to tie around the sukkah. Some person and Rav Moshe in the Tshuva says people who use the sukkahs without hayrav chachamim, without hayrav chachamim. So Baruch Hashem, we learned a little halacha over the years, but the old sukkahs were problematic. If they would billow back and forth, it was a big problem. Okay, and that's from this Gemara. Okay, so what do we see? We see over here that if it can't stand beruach mitzuya, that it's not a good wall. Now let's go back to Masechta Eruvin, Tashma, or Masechta Shabbos. Okay, now here's what we're speaking about. Speaking about passive barois, guys, right? And again, this is Rishus HaYachid. You want, and this is Rishus HaRabim to avert this. We're all familiar. You go ahead. You have these. This is the Yumdim, so you can cut out this, cut out this, cut out this. The problem is over here. The wind's going to move it back and forth. It's not going to be a good mechitza, right? The wind is going to make this, and this is working on some mechitza. It's not going to be a good mechitza. So the Gemara answers, what are you going to do? You're going to do this. That says the Gemara. Tashma, hayasham ilan. You have a tree, a geder or a fence. There they are, right there. Aleph and Beis. A mechitzas akonim gimel. Neither mishum diyumid. The halacha of two boards. So I lechera. Why isn't it a problem of the wind swaying it? So nami mishum da'avalei behutza v'dafna. You made it behutza v'dafna. Okay, for the next Gemara, you need a little. You're familiar with the case. Here's your picture, but I got to fill you in on a little halacha. Okay. Okay. There's a halacha of mechitza. If you own a property and you go ahead and you fence the property for the purpose of residence, then you can carry throughout that property, no matter how big it is. Conversely, if it's fenced, but not for the purpose of dira, you're limited to what? To Beis Hasayim. You're limited to an area of the Mishkan, which is 5,000 square amas. 5,000 square amas. If you would go outside of that, it would be a din in Carmelis, you'd be stuck and carried 4 amas. So here's the case. This person's sitting under a tree, and the tree is within 3 tfachim of the ground. That's the aleph. It's within 3 tfachim of the ground. And this is the guy who watches the peiros. The halacha is he can carry throughout this area, right? He can carry throughout this area. Yeah? How far can he carry? Let's say it's a huge tree. How far can he carry? So pashtus, you would say he can only carry up to Beis Hasayim. He can only carry up to that area. Why? Because if a tree naturally grows, it's not hukif ledira. He didn't have in mind to be mekif ledira. It just happened by itself. So he should be limited to 2,000. Now, if you're telling me you're going to answer up where he went ahead and he braided it, then he should be able to walk even farther than that. He should be able to walk, again, like any other Rishus HaYachid that you do l'shem dira. The Gemara is going to answer, the purpose of this guy is not for under the tree. If the purpose of this guy is to watch outside, this is a dira that's made for lechutz, that the guy should come in from the outside to get himself from the shade. It's not meant to live in. It's meant to go ahead and get him from the outside, and therefore it's not considered a good dira. Okay, that's the Gemara. Let's see it inside. Again, you might be familiar with, this is a Gemara in Erevin Tesvav. Says the Gemara, Toshma, Elon ha-mesach ala oretz. You have an elon, a tree, that is mesach ala oretz, that is literally masking, it's hanging over the ground. If the knife, if the branch is not higher than the ground of tfachim, you're able to carry underneath it. Why can you carry? It's swaying back and forth, and you told me that's not a good mechitza. And for Gemara Hasanami he braided it, so therefore it's not swaying back and forth. If it's not braided, if he braided it, so obviously that's an action of hukaf ledira. He should be able to carry what throughout the whole thing and not being limited to Beis Hasayim. It's like your property that you went ahead and you hook it for the purpose of residential purposes. Alama Amar Rav Huna, Berei Rav Yeshua, Ein Metalton Boyam at Aleph, Ella Beis Hasayim. You're only Metalton Beis Hasayim. But if you went ahead and you braided it, that makes it, you braided it for residential purposes, you should be able to carry throughout the whole thing and not limited to Beis Hasayim. On that, Gemara answers, it's a dira that it's tashmish for the airspace. Again, it's not made for the inside, it's made for the outside. You can only carry out that amount. Okay, so far we've held serve, and we have one more case. Okay, we have one more case, let's get it. Okay, this guy is over here. Shabbos over here. He gets 2,000 amas from here and 2,000 amas from there. If he's in this, he gets 2,000 amas there, 2,000. Same thing over here. The same question. This is not going to be what? It's not a walls. They're not walls. Why? Because again, it's okay. So you got the drift. Says the Gemara. Okay. Tashma. Shavas betel shugavoya asara. He's kind of shvisa erev Shabbos ben hashmasis in a hill that's higher than 10. V'hu me arba amis ad beis asayim. V'chein beneka a cleft in the ground. Shu omik asara v'hu me arba amis ad beis asayim. V'chein kama kitsoyra b'shiboilis makifos isa. And mahalches kula v'chutzla payimam. He could walk the whole distance and outside 2,000 amas. Afagav to go azal v'asi. It's moving back and forth, so you see it's a good mechitza. And Gemara Hasanami David Hutza B'Dafna. It's when he did Hutza B'Dafna. Okay. Wish you all good luck. Thank you for listening.